where you can learn to be heard, trusted, and taken seriously. Today, we're going to be talking about executive presence and why you need it. Executive presence is the ability to inspire confidence in other people, where people trust you to know what you're talking about, to handle pressure, to lead others. It is important to your career as well as to your income to have strong executive presence. Hey, Roseanne, welcome. I'm glad you're here. It is good for your career and your income to have executive presence because the the Research Institute has determined that executive presence is up to 26% of the reasons that people get promoted to leadership positions. Now, I want to be clear, executive presence has nothing to do with charisma or personality, and it absolutely has nothing to do with job titles. It has to do with your ability to have people perceive your credibility, your confidence, your clarity, and your leadership. The good news is that executive presence is a leadership skill. And just like all leadership skills, they can be taught. So let's get started. Executive presence has three basic pillars. The first and most important one is how you carry yourself under pressure. Anyone can handle themselves when things are going well. But if things are rough, that's where the real executive presence comes in. The most important pillar of can you handle yourself well under pressure? Can you show your confidence, your composure, your decisiveness, your emotional control? Because if you can, all those things are going to represent your credibility. And that is one of the things that executive presence is built on. So, if you're in a meeting and someone challenges one of your ideas, what do? Do you get defensive? Or do you say, that's an interesting point. Let's discuss that. If you can do the latter, then you're on your way to having a strong executive presence. The second pillar is communications. Now, you can be absolutely wonderful, but if people don't understand you, you don't have executive presence. There are four areas that communication is significant for executive presence. And the first one is point first communication. We've talked about this multiple times, but just to refresh, point first is where you start with your point and then you explain if you need to. Too many people start here and they go around and they set up the story and then they decide what they're going to do and how they want to say it. And then they finally say it and then they repeat themselves and explain again. That's not what an executive does. An executive with executive presence starts with a point and explains as much as they need to afterwards, short and concise. And that takes us to the second point under communications, conciseness. Executives don't ramble. Leaders don't use filler words and they don't over explain. They are concise in what they talk about. Short and sweet, to the point, that's smart. The third one is strategic pauses. Now, strategic pauses are, in my opinion, the most underrated aspect of communication that's out there. Strategic pauses are very powerful when you use them to emphasize a point or in between 2 points where you want people to have just a moment to digest what you've said. Leaders know how to do strategic pauses to their benefit. Leaders with executive presence are not intimidated by silence. Other people think that silence is a bad thing, and they feel the need to fill them with filler words or over explaining. Silence is golden, especially when you treat it as a pause. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Got a gerbil in my throat. Anyway, Um, so we've talked about point first communication, we've talked about conciseness, we've talked about strategic pause, and the last thing is vocal variety. Vocal, vocal variety is when you slow down, you finish your sentences, you finish your words, you don't use filler words, and you don't ramble. Now, the most important thing here, in my opinion, is finishing your words. A lot of people, especially English as a second language speakers, have a tendency not to finish the end of words. For example, the ing words, sitting, hitting, telling, a lot of times they'll drop the G off and you end up with sitting, hitting, telling. That does not sound like executive presence. You need to finish your words as strong as you start them. And you need to finish your sentences as strong as you start them. Speaking of English as a second language speakers, executive presence is not about losing your accent. It is about being understood. And some things that help you to be understood are the following. Interestingly enough, very few non-English languages have the TH sound, the th, like this, those, these. Russian, Polish, Turkish, French, many of the Asian languages, and a lot of the Latin-based languages don't have a TH in them. So when an English as a second language speaker takes on English, they may replace that TH with a D or a Z. So you end up with dis, that, those, or this, that, those. Those are not English words. So we need to focus on your pronunciation and your enunciation. That's what good clarity is. Another sound that is not common in all languages is a soft I, like in hit, sit, lip. What ESL speakers often do is change that soft I to a hard E. So sit becomes seat, hit becomes heat, lip becomes leap. The problem is when you move it from an I to a hard E, you create a new English word, and that can be very confusing. So make sure you get your pronunciation solid. It's important not just to know the words, but how to pronounce them clearly so that you can be understood. Another thing that ESL speakers sometimes have challenges with is stress. A surprising number of languages keep everything very even. Every word has the same emphasis. In English, we have a lot of stresses. So, for example, there is a difference between when you say, I need the report by Friday, versus, I need the report by Friday. That has two separate sounds with two separate meanings. So you want to make sure that you're stressing the right word. Finally, you want to worry about pace. Sometimes ESL speakers will try to speak very fast. Either they want to get it over with quickly, they want people to think that they're very good at their English, or they're just trying to remember the words and get them out of their mouth as quickly as possible. Whatever it is, we need to slow down. And this holds true for native English speakers as well. Many times people who are nervous speak very quickly, and that makes it hard for people to understand. And final message for ESL speakers is to remember to articulate. A clear message beats a perfect accent every time. You have an opportunity to receive a free Clear Beats Perfect booklet by going to my Substack web store. You can find that on my Substack website. So go there, click on the store, and download your free Clear Beats Perfect booklet for my ESL speakers out there. I've told you that the first and most important pillar is how you carry yourself under pressure. The second is communication. The third is appearance. Now, this is the least important, but it is important nonetheless because people make judgments very quickly. You want to make sure that you are professional. Now, fortunately, most businesses are past the three-piece suit, business suit with skirts time. We have a lot of business casual, but you can still look professional while being business casual. You also want to have an attention to detail. Are you wearing the right shoes? Be aware of situational awareness. If you're going to be in a business meeting, you don't want to be wearing shorts, even if they're dress shorts. You want to treat yourself with self-respect. Executive presence doesn't have to be expensive, but it does have to be intentional. So the three pillars are how you carry yourself under pressure, communications, and experience. Now let's move on to 5 behaviors that instantly increase your executive presence. The first is speak later, not first. Now, you don't want to wait until the end. Other ideas may supersede yours, and they may have moved on to something else. However, you don't want to be the first speaker. You want to observe and listen and then contribute thoughtfully in what you say. People respect measured contributions more than frequent contributions. So you want to contribute early, but not first. You also want to lead with conclusions. Now, that's much like starting with the point first. Executives want answers, not long stories. You want to start with something like, I recommend that we adopt Plan B. I recommend that we move forward. And then explain what you need to go from there. But again, just like point first communication, start with your point or start with your recommendation and then explain. The third is one of the most important in my opinion. Stop apologizing for existing. Too many people start their sentences with, I might be wrong. This is probably a stupid idea. I don't know if this makes sense. Replace that with, here's my idea. Here's my perspective. Don't apologize. Tell them what you think. It's your idea, and it's probably a good one. But if it's not, or it's not adopted, it's okay. At least you stood up for what you believed. The fourth behavior that instantly increases executive presence is to own your space. That has to do with your posture, with eye contact, with physical stillness. Don't be fidgeting. Don't be rocking back and forth in what you're doing. Use gestures that make sense during your communication. Excessive movement suggests nervousness. You don't want to show nervousness. You want to own your space. And finally, consider speaking at 90% of your normal speed. Most professionals talk too fast, especially when they're nervous, especially on video, and ESL speakers also have a tendency to speak fast. Slower speech improves authority, understanding, clarity, and retention for the information that you've shared. Why do some people have a lack of presence? And this particularly comes from people who are highly intelligent. Highly intelligent people, or people who are experts in their field, have a tendency to want to talk like experts instead of leaders. They over-explain what they know. They want to position themselves as the expert and seek approval. They confuse knowledge with influence. And when you do that, you're putting yourself in a position that knowledge gets results, but that's not executive presence. What you want to do is marry knowledge for the results and executive presence for the opportunities. The combination is where you get real success. Let's talk a minute about ESL professionals. English as a second language often think that accent is their biggest problem to executive presence. It's not. Clarity is. Again, enunciation. Articulate your words, every syllable. Be very clear. Have confidence in what you're talking about. Use stresses on words. Remember, brevity is important. And finally, just remember that small communication improvements create large professional gains. And again, I want to tell our ESL professionals, go to the Substack web store and get the Clear Beats Perfect free booklet. There's a lot of great information in here that will help you expand your executive presence. The goal in executive presence is not to look important. The goal is to communicate in a way that gives people confidence in you. Opportunities rarely go to the most qualified person. They usually go to the person that people trust the most. And that's how you define executive presence. I thank you all for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Lemon, thanks for stopping in. I'm sorry that you're catching the tail end. But know that executive presence is important. The ability to inspire confidence in other people will benefit you personally and professionally. Thanks for being with me today. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you on Sunday. Goodbye.